everyone, this is Mindy Egan for Lawn Fawn, and today I'm going to be creating a springtime scene using the Swivel Surprise. The first thing that I'm going to do is create the card base or the inside scene for my interactive card. So I have a piece of white cardstock. This is a 110-pound cardstock that's cut to 5.5 by 8.5. I placed it onto a sticky mat to hold my cardstock in place. And then I placed down the slimline grassy stencil. So there is a little bit that overhangs, which is going to stick down to the sticky mat. And then I am going to start ink blending with a celery stick, which is a light green ink, using a blending brush. So I really just wanted a light wash of that color. And then once I have that done, I'm going to come in with a freshly cut grass. And I am going to do that from the bottom and just slowly work my way up a little bit. I wanted it to be light grass towards the top and then a little bit darker at the bottom. So a lot of that is going to be kind of hanging off at the bottom there. I'm starting kind of on the sticky mat and working my way up to get that nice smooth transition. Then I'm going to shift the stencil down so it's going to mask off that grass that I just ink blended. And I was a little worried that my stencil would shift because there's not a lot of the stencil sticking down to the sticky mat. So I did place some tape down to hold that down. And then I'm going to come in with the slimline cloudy stencil, and I will be using mermaid ink for this. So I went across the entire panel with a blending brush. I'm going to turn or rotate my stencil to do the other side and just repeat that all the way down the front of this panel. So I'll ink blend on some cards, I'll rotate it and ink blend the other side so that it isn't the same design of cloud right next to each other. And then once I get towards the bottom, I am going to ink blend, but I'm going to start on the grassy stencil there, the mask, and blend up just to kind of help that transition so it's not so stark white down there at the bottom. Then I will just remove this piece of cardstock from my sticky mat and I'm going to set it off on the side. We'll be working with this a little bit later on. I'm going to stamp out some images that I wanted to use for my scene, and I am choosing some images from the I Like Big Butterflies stamp set. I added all of the butterflies because they're so cute, plus some of their little trails that they leave. And I also have some clouds here from the stamp set, All the Clouds. I'm stamping them on 80-pound white cardstock, and I am using the Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. I did stamp it a couple times to make sure I was getting a really good impression. And just to be sure that my ink is 100% dry, I'm going to hit that with my heat tool to reduce any smearing. I'm coloring in the images using my Ohuhu markers. So just using my color swatch chart, I picked out some colors that I wanted to have to turn these into monarch butterflies. So I am using a 3-shade color combination. I'm starting with the darkest color that's closest to the body. Then I'll blend out with my mid-tone and then finish off on the edge of that section with the lightest shade that I chose. And I will repeat this step for all of the butterflies. So I'm just going to show you this one here that has where the inside of the wings is kind of all right next to each other. And then I'll show you this one where they're separated. So I'm doing the same thing. It's just a little bit smaller of an area. On these particular butterflies, where they're more sectioned off, you might only want to use a 2-color blend because it can be kind of hard to get all three in that small of an area. I did manage, but I was getting a little short on room. Once I finish all of these section for the wings, I'm going to move on to the body and the outside wings. And to get that monarch look, I'm going to give the body a 3-color combination. So I start out with the darkest marker and then blend out to the lightest. So if they're facing a particular direction, I will usually put the lightest color in the direction that they're facing and then the darker color on the opposite side. Now, for the actual wings, I'm only going to use 2 colors to do those because, again, that's a pretty small area. And I wanted those outer wing areas to be darker. So I left off my lightest color and stuck to the darkest, my shadow color, and my mid-tone. And then once in a while, I will come in and go back over some of those areas with my darkest color because I really wanted to emphasize to to make it look like a monarch. I just didn't want it to be stark black, so I did want to have a little variation there. Now you may notice I am coloring over some of the details in the wings, and I will bring those details back a little later on. For the clouds, I'm outlining the inside of the cloud with a really light blue marker. After all of my images are colored in, I'm going to line up the coordinating dies, including the trails, and run those through my die cut machine to cut all of those pieces out. So once I pop everything out, I'm going to kind of set those off on the side, and we're going to come back and work on that card stock that I ink blended on earlier. Now, essentially, what this is the inside of my card. So I am scoring this at 4 1/4, and then I'm going to fold that in half and crease that fold with my bone folder to create my actual card base. So that is why I did my ink blending first. I wanted to have all the ink blending done so that my ink didn't catch on those creases. I'm taking my mermaid ink and I'm smushing it down onto my glass work surface. I added a little bit of water and I'm going to splatter the background just to add some subtle interest. This would probably show up a little bit better if I would use a re-inker, but this does work for a really nice subtle look. I'm taking one of the main pieces from the Swivel Surprise, and you'll notice here that there are some score lines on there. They form an X, and what we're going to do is fold along all of those score lines. So I start by folding that one flap down at the top, and then you can see I'm going to start folding these diagonally and then also right in half. That is what's going to help our mechanism move. Then there's also a flap down at the bottom that we need to fold as well. Once we have everything folded and scored, what we're going to do is we're going to pinch that center point where that those X folds were. This kind of reminds me of those little paper handheld games we used to do, or I did in grade school, is we're going to pinch those together. I will do it again. I'll undo it and show you it again. But what it'll do is form that triangle or that house looking shape. So here I'm just going to show you again. We're going to push in on those sides to kind of pinch it and then form the house. And then I'm going to reinforce those folds with our bone folder because that's going to be what our interactive mechanism is. Then I flip that whole piece over. I have the inside of my card base open. Now, like I said, the interactive piece is flipped over, and I'm going to add some liquid glue to this rectangle tab that we had scored earlier. Little hard to see on camera, but once I add my liquid glue to that, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to line up the left hand side with that score line that I created earlier. So that should match up to your card. And then once you let your glue dry, you can pull it and you can see how then our interactive piece is starting to move. The top and the bottom kind of pop out. You push it in, it goes back in. I use the rest of the pieces in the Swivel Surprise and I die cut them from some Mist and Tide Pool cardstock. So we do have one, I'm calling it a donut. It's the ring that's going to kind of go under our flap. There is another circle that's going to go over the top to kind of hide our interactive mechanism. And then there is the inside of that donut piece. That is what's going to be up on top. I did start with the Mist cardstock, but then thought this yellow would look really cool, kind of like a sun popping out. So I die cut it from a sticky note cardstock. So I have the donut piece in the background is Tide Pool. The top portion there is Mist. And then that other circle that's going to pop out is sticky note. Now, what I was planning to do here is add a sentiment in there, but I'm going to do that on white cardstock. What I did is went through and I lined up how I wanted my scene to look. And then once I figured out the placement for it all, I'm just adding tape runner and I'm going to attach most of the butterflies to my scene and the clouds, but I didn't attach anything for the interactive part yet. I'm going to go ahead and stamp a sentiment. This comes from the More Magic Messages stamp set. I'm stamping that in black ink and then I'm going to die cut it with the coordinating die. So this is going to fit perfectly onto my circle that I have die cut out of the Mist cardstock. I love this brand new color. It is such a perfect light blue. And because it's going to be interactive, I'm not adding any foam squares or foam tape to my card. I did want to add a little bit more interest to that yellow piece. So I am going around the edges of that sticky note cardstock using some number 2 pencil and a blending brush. Now, for our interactive piece, that top piece that kind of swings out, it looks like a butter knife to me, and it's curved to fit the shape of that circle. So I added tape runner to the top of that butter knife. I lined up the edge or the curve of that butter knife with the curve of my yellow circle. And then down at the bottom, we have another piece that has a curved edge to it. I'm going to add a tape runner there. You take your donut, you kind of slide it underneath that arm, And then the edge of the donut or the curve of the donut is going to match that curve of your bottom interactive piece. So as I pull it, you can see how that's starting to swivel and the yellow is kind of popping out like the sun, which I thought was really fun. Then we have one more piece here. It is this little rectangle that has an X on it when you die cut it. And you are going to want to fold along that score line so it looks like a little seat. And I'm going to take some liquid glue and I'm placing it just in this one section. I'm matching up the X's. There is an X on that interactive piece. I'm lining up the X's and I'm placing that liquid glue just in that one kind of half triangle. Then I have that flap kind of flipped up. So this is the bottom of that seat, I guess we'll call it. I added liquid glue to that, and then I can go ahead and add my sentiment piece over the top. So that additional circle is going to be hiding our interactive mechanism. And then we still have this tab off on the left-hand side. So I am going to add some 1/4 inch double-sided tape to that tab. I'll remove the backing of that double-sided tape using a die pick. And you want to make sure that your mechanism is kind of pushed in. So again, it's lining up with that score line we created earlier. And then all you need to do is close your card, fold it up, and that is going to attach. So you can see as you open and close, everything is swiveling and moving nicely. Now that we have all of that done, I can finish off by decorating the rest of these. So I am going to be adding a cloud tucked behind the sun. I really could have added that right straight to the cardstock, but for some reason I added it behind my actual sun. And then I'm adding tape runner to the back of my butterfly. You just need to be sure that when you're adding your tape runner, that you're not adding it where it is going to stick to the card base because we want to make sure that this all moves nicely. I did adjust my sentiment because once the interactive mechanism was working, my sentiment was a little crooked. So thankfully, I used a tape runner and adjusted that. And then I added my last butterfly down there at the bottom. I'm going to finish off the inside here by adding a few details, and that is bringing in the details of the wings back by using a white gel pen. And then I also added in some additional highlights around the butterfly. The sentiment, there were some small areas that could be colored in. So I just recently picked up these really fun glitter pens. So I decided to use that for some of the leaves and then also the word amazing. One last thing I need to do is create the front of my card. So off screen on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of 80-pound white cardstock, I did the same scene ink blending using the slimline cloudy stencil and the slimline grassy stencil. And I'm going to stamp a sentiment, but this is one long sentiment and I wanted it to be on two separate lines. So I lined up the word beautiful day. I made sure that the margins were even on each side. I masked off the beginning portion of that sentence with a post it note, inked up the sentiment, removed the post it note, and then stamped that down. Now, you want to make sure that you clean your stamp really well and dry it really well before you move on to stamping the beginning half. I did not. So when I was lining it up, I did get a little bit of ink transfer, and all that did was kind of decide where my butterfly was going to go. So I'm just doing that same technique here of masking off. I brought in a clean post-it note so that when I was stamping it down, it masked it off and I didn't transfer any more ink than I already did. And like I said, that just decided where my butterfly was going to go on the front of my card. I can add tape runner to the back of this panel and then I'm going to add it to the front of my interactive card. So the front of my card pretty much matches the inside of my card. And now I have this really cute kind of springtime or even summertime scene with the swivel surprise. So as I open the card, the butterflies kind of look like they're flying around. The sun looks like it's popping out. And those two different shades of blue just really match the cloudy background that I created. I hope you enjoyed today's interactive inspiration. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.